I'd like to call this meeting to order. Ladies and gentlemen, will you join me in Pledge of Allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Will you join me in prayer, please? Today's prayer is taken from John Foster Dulles, Secretary of State, 1953 to 1959, under President Eisenhower. Heavenly Father, our institutions of freedom will not survive unless they are constantly replenished by the faith that gave them birth. Supreme Architect of the universe, we invoke thy blessing at this time. May this meeting thus be begun in peace and closed in harmony. For it is in your name, my Lord and Savior, my Jesus Christ, I pray. Amen. Commissioners, I think we're being attacked by the microphones today.
Did you have that later, Bill? I forgot my calendar. That's all right.
I don't have one. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you for attending our public business meeting today, Thursday, February 7th, 2013, 5 o'clock here in room 100 of the county complex. Commissioners, are there any additions or deletions to our agenda?
No, sir.
No, sir.
Gentlemen, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the minutes of our January 31st, 2013 public business meeting.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Brody, seconded by Commissioner Valentine. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Under report of the President, we had some disturbing information that was brought up by a constituent concerning a dog attack, and I told that constituent that we would look into it. And gentlemen, Chief Dick, our Chief of Public Safety, is here to give us an investigation report of his findings. Chief, please.
Good evening, Commissioners, Mr. Eberly, Mr. Rudd. As you're aware, on January the 18th, I was contacted and directed to begin a fact-finding investigation into allegations that were made on the evening of the 17th, which would have been the County Commissioners' public meeting, by Mr. Kenneth E. Wilmot of 513 Ford Avenue. I was also given a summary of Mr. Wilmot's comments, basically indicating that he was attacked by a pit bull while he was walking near his home on the 11th of January at approximately 10 till 7 in the evening. He was not bitten. He did run to a neighbor's house, seek refuge in the house. Fortunately, they were there, according to him, and allowed him access into the home. Ultimately, oh man, my own phone of all things. Ultimately, the neighbor, the lady that lived there, the resident, and she lives there with her husband, her son, and her husband, son, and her daughter-in-law. She called 911 and told them that the neighbor was there. A pit bull had attacked him. He had entered her house and so forth, and they needed assistance. The dispatcher asked if the subject had been bitten, if he had any injuries, and if they needed an ambulance. She asked Mr. Wilmot if he needed an ambulance at that time, and you could hear him in the background on the phone tapes and so forth indicating that he did not. The dispatcher then said, "I will send animal control," and Mr. Wilmot wanted the police at that point. She said thank you and hung up. With these details, we opened the investigation and started to look into Mr. Wilmot's complaints. I requested and obtained copies of the 911 radio and telephone tapes for the incident. I had a transcribed word-by-word report of the comments that Mr. Wilmot made at the Commissioners' meeting on the 17th. I received a copy of Chapter 25 of the County Code, which is the section that deals with every aspect of handling animals in Allegany County, the duties of the animal control officers, their authority, what they're able to do, vicious dogs, seizing dogs, and so forth. I also got a copy of Mr. Wilmot's affidavit that he filed on the 15th of January at Animal Control, basically again outlining his complaints. And during the investigation, I visited 11 different homes on Ford Avenue, interviewed, one's in close proximity to the home where the dog actually resides with the owner. I also interviewed approximately 16 people, most of which reside on Wilmot Avenue or neighbors up there, but also interviewed, in addition to Mr. Wilmot, the dog's owner, animal control personnel, etc. I guess the easiest way to start it is right at the very beginning. This thing gets a little confusing, but what I'd like to do is begin by summarizing a few of the telephone calls and radio tapes that went into the 911 center. And what we find is, after I reviewed the tapes, the first call, telephone call, came from the lady in the house where he sought refuge at that point. And that call came in at 6:57 p.m., 6:57 in the evening. The call was received at the 911 center from a female resident at the location where Mr. Wilmot went after the incident. She said her neighbor just came down the street and the pit bull next door got loose and it attacked him. Didn't hurt him, but it's loose. The subject that owns the dog is in a wheelchair. The dog must have broken his chain. This is her comments. The dispatcher at that point asked if she needs an ambulance, if he was bitten, if he's injured, and she asked Mr. Wilmot, and again, he can be heard in the background stating, "No, I'm not injured. I don't need an ambulance. He didn't get me. I got away from him." The dispatcher asked for the address. She gives the address where she resides and also says the dog is from the house that's right above me on Fort Hill Avenue. She gives some specific addresses, but intentionally I don't want to release addresses or names in this fact-finding report this evening. The dispatcher then says, "We'll go ahead and notify animal control." She says, "Thank you," and the call is ended. Almost immediately, the dispatcher sends out the page to animal control personnel, including Mr. Brubaker, who's the manager there. At 7 o'clock, so we're looking at approximately 3 minutes later, a call comes in to 911 from Mr. Carl Brubaker. Now, he's the animal control chief, for those of you who may not know. So he responded to that page in less than 3 minutes. Called in, dispatchers provided him then with the information on the caller, the location of the incident where the dog had gotten loose, and further indicated the neighbor's pit bull got loose, got aggressive, chased another neighbor. There were no injuries. They do not need an ambulance, but the dog is apparently still loose at this time. Mr. Brubaker responds by saying, "Okay, we'll see if we can't get somebody up there." At 7:03, so 3 minutes after Mr. Brubaker calls and about 5 to 6 minutes after the initial call from the lady at the residence, a call is received from Mr. Wilmot, the complainant. He's clearly upset. He makes statements such as, "I want a policeman up here on Ford Avenue right now. That dog attacked me, it lunged for me, I jumped back." The dispatcher asked, "Did it bite you? Did it break the skin?" Mr. Wilmot answers, "No. The only reason I'm alive is I was able to run to my neighbor's house. I was able to get away from that." I won't get into the terminology. "You better get up here right now and get that dog. I want it out of the neighborhood." The dispatcher then says, "Animal control will be there." Mr. Wilmot responds by saying, "They won't show up, they won't come. You get a policeman up here right now." Dispatcher says, "That's what animal control is in charge of, sir." And Mr. Wilmot replies, "No, you send an officer up here. I'm going to call the mayor in the morning. If you people don't do something about this dog, there's going to be hell." The dispatcher responds, "I'll contact the police and have an officer come up to see you." Just a few minutes later, the dispatcher sends the initial report out to CPD and asks him to go up and speak with Mr. Wilmot. 7:14, so we're now roughly 11 minutes from his first call. A second call is received at the 911 center from Mr. Wilmot. "That dog's still running loose," and the dispatcher says, "The policeman's on his way, sir." Mr. Wilmot responds, "He better get up here soon. That dog's all over the neighborhood. You can't get out of the house." I think it's important, and I want to jump skip for just a second. That call was at 7:14 in the evening. Now we're 17 minutes past the initial call. We're 14 minutes past the time that Mr. Brubaker called in. Based on investigation, based on these tapes, based on several interviews, it revealed that Mr. Brubaker happened to be at Animal Control at the on Furnace Street at the time this call was received. Immediately after receiving the information about the incident, he left the shelter in a county vehicle. I think it's important to note also, his hours are normally 8 to 4. Now this is 7 o'clock in the evening. Mr. Brubaker, the manager, is still at the shelter performing his duties. Anyway, he left the shelter. He was leaving when he got the page, and he continued to drive to the location and in a county vehicle with equipment and so forth. He indicates that he got there about 7:10 to 7:15 p.m. That's between 13 and 18 minutes after the initial call was received at the 911 center. Didn't immediately see the dog. He drove up Ford Avenue, turned around the park, drove back down, didn't see it. Actually made 3 passes before he finally saw the dog when he was coming back down. He saw the dog was actually at the corner of the owner's property, along with the subject who turned out to be the brother of the owner. He parked on parked the vehicle on Ford Avenue. It's a very narrow street. Now, the owner's home is just above the person that called in initially. They're very close together, so they're in very close proximity. He parked basically in front of the owner's home, but that vehicle could also be seen from the caller's home that made the initial call as well. It's very close there. Spoke to the subject, had the dog. He observed a 6-foot length of commercial type tether or rope that dogs are normally tied by. Now, it's not a piece of clothesline. It's not a piece of just rope or something. This is a commercially purchased dog. I don't know if it's chain or what, but it has a coating and so forth over it. It's pretty good stuff is what I'm trying to point out. Designed for a dog to keep them on your property. Where the dog was initially tied is also about 75 feet from the actual street. The tether that the dog was tied with, he noticed it was frayed on the end. It had clearly rubbed on something and had broken. He was advised by the owner's brother that the neighbor next door called and advised him the dog was loose. He said he went outside to the corner of the house by the street. While on the scene, Mr. Brubaker observed no indications the dog was aggressive or vicious at this time. He said the dog appeared to be more fearful. The dog was taken inside by the owner's inside the owner's residence. Mr. Brubaker secured from Ford Avenue at approximately 7:25. Mr. Brubaker's statement report on this incident further indicates the owner was very cooperative. Animal control records revealed no history of problems at this location with this dog or the owner, and he secured at that time. But again, he'd already been working 3.5 hours over his normal work schedule at that point. It's interesting because, again, he secured at roughly 7:25. At 7:22, there's another call from Mr. Wilmot demanding the police. Again, they tell them animal control's on the way, and he says, I want the police. At 7:25, they receive a 4th call. I'm sorry, let me give you those last 2 times again. 7:22, and then 3 minutes later, again at 7:25, Mr. Wilmot calls. From probably 7:15 on, at the very latest, maybe before, Mr. Brubaker is on the scene, the vehicle is out front, the dog is in custody, and when these other calls come in, the dog is already in the basement, and Mr. Brubaker is securing from the area. There's some other communications with the 911 center between units and so forth, but nothing that's particularly important to this investigation and points anything else out, other than Mr. Wilmot is very upset and very agitated. I'd like to go through, if you'll give me just a moment, with Mr. Brubaker's actual statement, and I'd also like to summarize the owner of the dog's statements, and I think they give you a pretty clear picture of what happened. Interview with Mr. Brubaker. Again, he's the shelter manager under County Code 225. He's the animal shelter manager, has supervisor responsibility over the shelter, the animal control officers, and the animal shelter volunteers. 225, as I said earlier, spells out very clearly the duties and responsibility of animal control personnel, how do you handle dogs running at large, impoundment of animals, dangerous animals, etc. Mr. Brubaker, were you contacted by the 911 Communications Center on the evening of January 11th, 2013 in the evening hours? Yes, I received a page from 911 shortly before 7 p.m. I called them back as soon as I received it. It was about 7 p.m. The dispatcher advised me a pit bull had gotten loose, and he gave me the address on Ford Avenue. Told me the dog had gotten aggressive, chased one of the residents who lived in the area. The subject wasn't bitten, but the dog was still loose. I told him I would find somebody to respond. Where were you when you answered the page and called 911 back? I was just leaving the animal shelter on Furnace Street. Did you contact an animal control officer to respond to Ford Avenue and attempt to locate the dog? Since I was just leaving the shelter and was already out and had a county vehicle, it was just easier for me to respond to Ford Avenue and try to find the dog. Were you in a county vehicle, and if so, does that vehicle have normal equipment that would be used by animal control officers responding to an incident such as a dog running loose? Yes, it was a county vehicle. It has normal equipment for handling animal incidents. How long did it take you to arrive at Ford Avenue? Just normal driving time. There wasn't much traffic. I arrived between 7:10 and 7:15. It's probably just a few miles from the shelter on Furnace Street. I came down Baltimore Avenue onto Willowbrook Road, turned onto Pine, then onto Riser, and up the hill to Ford Avenue. I drove up Ford Avenue slowly, didn't see the dog, went to the top of the hill and turned around, came back down the street, made 3 passes, and finally saw it on the last time. It was at the corner of the owner's property where his home is located. The subject was holding the dog, and I spoke with him about the incident. Now, as far as the times with his arrival at 7:10 to 7:15 and the distance and so forth, I drove that yesterday at about 4 o'clock, and traffic was fairly heavy at 4 o'clock. It's just short of 3 miles. It took me 9 minutes. So if he left there at 7 p.m. or even a minute or two after, it's very likely he's there between 7:10 and 7:15 in the evening. Who is the subject that had the dog, and please summarize your conversation and observations. The man that had the dog is the brother of the actual owner. He also lives in the house with his brother. He told me he didn't know the dog had gotten loose, and he had just received a call from the next door neighbor who advised him it was loose. Now, a note on that as well, I also verified that by talking to the son of the resident and the lady who made the initial call. I asked them if they in fact placed a call. The lady, as soon as she got off the telephone with 911, she called her son, who is a friend of the dog's owner, and said, you need to call him and let him know the dog's loose. Whenever the people that own the dog go out of town or go away or need some help, these people next door, including the son, take care of the dog for them, so he's very familiar with the animal. So she called 911. A couple minutes probably go by, she calls her son and said, contact them, make sure they know the dog's loose. He calls immediately while he's on his way home. He wasn't home at the time, and gets the brother, who says he then immediately goes outside. Let's see. He said he went outside to look for the dog. It was a corner of the property. When he saw it, he called the dog and it came to him. I observed a 6-foot length of line or cable hanging from the dog, frayed in, so forth, as I stated earlier. Was the line or cable like clothes or rope? No, it's a commercial type line with the plastic coating made to keep dogs outside. What were your observations concerning the dog? I was just approaching when the owner called the dog, and it came right to him. When I approached, he had a hold of a piece of line that was still hanging from the dog. The dog at this point seemed more fearful than aggressive. It's a mixed breed dog. It may have some pit bull in the mixture, but it's basically just a mixed breed. Now, that's Mr. Brubaker's comments on the dog, and Mr. Brubaker, I would consider, I mean, he makes his living working with animals and has for some period of time, and I consider him an expert on that. But I also took photographs of the dog when I went up, and I went to a veterinarian and asked, well, first of all, I asked the staff members out front to look at the photos and tell me what they thought, what breed they thought this dog was. Without exception, no, I did get several different mixes in there, but I was told that it may have some pit bull in it, but there's no way to tell for sure. One said they thought it had some hound in it. One said they thought it had some terrier in it. One said they thought it had some German shepherd in it. They took it back, talked to the veterinarian who came out, and the veterinarian referred to it jokingly as Heinz 57 variety. It may have some pit bull in it, but there's no way to know for sure. So that verifies Mr. Brubaker's statement on that. The owner of the dog said the dog is never loose. It has never bitten anyone who comes to their home. There were no indications of the dog being vicious. The owner told me he was taking the dog back inside their home. He assured me they would take measures to make sure the dog did not get loose again. At this point, the dog was under control and in the owner's home, and I had been advised by the 911 dispatcher that the neighbor who the dog got aggressive with was not bitten, was uninjured, so I cleared the scene and went home. One point that I want to make as well, when the owner said the dog is not vicious and has never bitten anybody, I've been to the house about 4 times now. The first time I went to the house, the dog was tied on the outside back probably 50 to 75 feet from the street. I didn't knock on the door. I went back and approached the dog. The dog did turn around and look at me. As I approached, I had my hand out. The dog was pulling at the tether or whatever it is, and it was up on its hind legs, but it showed no aggression. It was barking, but it wasn't a bark of anger. And ultimately, I had the dog holding it in my arms, and the dog's right there in front of me. There was no attempt for it to bite me, and it had never seen me before in its life. Okay, another question. Did you document, this is to Mr. Brubaker, did you document this incident with animal control reports? When you had the opportunity, did you check and see if animal control has any prior history of complaints at this location with the dog and its owners? Yes, I completed the normal reports, and I have a copy of Mr. Brubaker's report. I also checked and found no history of complaints at this location or any complaints relating to the owner or the dog. In addition, as a matter of routine for the next few weeks, animal control officers are making routine checks at this area on Ford Avenue just to make sure the dog is in fact keeping they are in fact keeping the dog in the home or surely confined in the yard, safely confined in the yard. We have found no issues at this time. Quick statement from Billy Wilson. Gave a name. Quick statement from the owner of the dog. And this is just a summary. The owner of the dog said he got the dog about 3 years ago from a friend because his friend didn't have any place to keep the dog. He said it's a mixed breed of dog, may have some terrier or pit bull, but the vet where he takes it said he couldn't be sure. The owner, who is confined to a wheelchair, lives with his brother and his brother's 3 young children. He watches his brother's children while his brother is working, and he also watches the children of the friend. Second time I went there, there was no school that day. There must have been 10 kids there that day, and the dog was inside at that time. The dog interacts fine with the children. This is him speaking. He has never been mean or bitten anyone. The neighbors next door take care of the dog if we're away. This is the neighbor where Mr. Wilmot went when the incident occurred. None of our neighbors have ever complained to us about the dog. Sometimes he is outside. He will bark, especially if people go by the house, but he is well back from the street. The neighbor next door called my brother on the phone that told him the dog had gotten loose. He went right outside. The dog was at the corner of the property. He called the dog, and she came right in to him. He was holding the dog when the animal control officer parked the vehicle and talked to him about the dog. He brought the dog inside at that time. The next door neighbor's husband also walked over to make sure we knew the dog had gotten loose, but he was already inside at that time. When the police came, the dog was also inside. She couldn't have been loose very long. The line we used to restrain her, tied outside, was frayed and broken. We've never had a problem with her getting loose or leaving the property before. We've now bought a heavier duty chain with a plastic coating on to make sure it doesn't happen again. I could go on and on. I took statements again from a lot of people. I don't think there's any reason to go any further. Bottom line is animal control did respond. They responded very quickly. Now Mr. Wilmot also says in his complaints that it's a sin, the money that's wasted on animal control, and they don't respond. I checked with the 911 center, and in 2012, animal control officers handled about 1,200 incidents that went through 911 center only. There's others that go directly to the shelter they respond to. Many of those calls to 911 or after hours type calls. As a matter of fact, I think they're averaging about two a night now, responses after hours. As far as I can tell from speaking to Mr. Brubaker, Mr. DeVore, checking 911, very, very, very few complaints are filed by citizens with the county that they're unhappy with the way animal control personnel are handling their calls and responding. They're clearly responding. I know for a fact that about a week ago they had to seize a dog that needed brought in, needed taken off the street. They did that one. I also know for a fact that over the last few months they've had to put 4 dogs down that had been brought in, were unsuitable for adoption, and were potentially vicious type dogs. To indicate that they're simply not doing the job, I think, is a great exaggeration. Again, they were there that night, and I can find no problem with the way the county handled the call. I should also note, Chief Hennett's here this evening along with Lieutenant Lepley. When Mr. Wilmot filed a complaint against the county, he also filed a complaint with the city of Cumberland, and there was an investigation conducted by Lieutenant Lepley of the city of Cumberland as well. Now, he didn't share information with me on mine, or with his, and I didn't share information. They were done parallel, but Mr. Wilmot did also file a complaint with them as well.
Okay. Couple things before I turn it over to the commissioners. This particular citizen has been coming for over a year to complain about animal control. There have been many times he has exaggerated the information. He has then gone to the city of Cumberland, done the exact same thing there. I happened to be in attendance of one of the meetings he was at. It is very important to us as we try to stay true to open government and that this is the people's county. We want to hear their comments. It is very important. However, there comes a time when you just can't cry wolf all the time. We're not here to take action and listen to a bunch of crap, for lack of better words. And commissioners, I'm not going to sit by and allow this citizen to make false accusation against law enforcement, make false accusation against animal control. And something needs to be done. Thank you, Chief, for that thorough report. Commissioners, is there anything that you...
Did you inform Mr. Wilmot of your findings, Chief, or have you ever talked to him?
I assumed Mr. Wilmot would be here this evening. He's not
I
in
assume-
appearance. I did interview Mr. Wilmot yesterday, and I assumed he would be here tonight, but I did not share any of my findings with him. Obviously, when I'm questioning him, he may get some idea that you know where I was going and what I was looking for and so forth. But no, I didn't share it.
Without getting into too much detail or prolonging this much longer, was his statements consistent with what his neighbors seen? I guess it falls back to what
the neighbors, and I'll just summarize all their statements. And,
Yeah.
and again, this is a very nice middle-class neighborhood.
Absolutely.
Well-maintained homes, retired people and middle-class working people. Really met some nice people there. I'm going to throw it away this time. Several of the people said they've never seen this dog.
Okay.
All the people, without exception, said they've never seen a dog running loose up there at all. Some people said that they knew he had a dog. Sometimes they do hear it barking, and a couple of them qualified that by saying it's usually when people go up or down the street, the dog will bark. One gentleman did say sometimes when he's watching TV in the evenings, he can hear it barking. But nobody had anything negative to say about the dog, or there's about, all these people have dogs too, pretty much. There was no real complaints about the dog or the animal up there at all.
Any? Bill?
Well, I know my first experience with Mr. Wilmot was on complaint of a gentleman that had 5 dogs that supposedly barked 24 hours a day. I visited that property 5 times by myself, and 4 of those times all 5 dogs were out in the yard. I walked up to the fence of the house where the dogs were. They never did bark. And I think this is just some sort of a crusade Mr. Wilmot's on. And the worst part is he's making fabrications about our city police, about our county workers not responding, and that can lead to greater problems when the citizens lose faith in the people that's there to help them. So I think that it definitely has to stop.
Okay. What is interesting, I was down in Annapolis yesterday, and MACO is going over a Senate bill that talks about false accusations against authorities and putting some kind of penalty that you just can't throw out these false accusations. They need to be investigated to see if it's true, but you're damaging the credibility of law enforcement, damaging the credibility of government trying to do the right thing, and it's interesting that Senate bill is going to have a hearing on February the 20th, which I may go down for the hearing to see how it goes. But what I would like to do, with your permissions, Commissioners, is direct Dave to write a letter to Mr. Wilmot. In this letter, I would like the ability that we did have a report. This is some of the findings that we had in this report. Unfortunately, his claims have not been our reporter direct conflict of what he has claimed. I enjoy when Mr. Wilmot does come to our meetings. I want all of our citizens to come to our meetings. We do sign up on topics, and it's important that we hear what our subjects have, what the citizens have to say on their particular subject. But that being the case, what I would like to do is, if he would like to come and talk to about animal control as a subject, that he pulls me aside at the beginning of the meeting. He then tells me about what he wants to talk about. If I think this is something that needs to be an investigation, his safety is important to me. Is this something that we do need to be brought up or not? I would like to have a conversation with him. But for the most part, animal control will not be a subject that he will be talking here. We do have an action for him. What is it, the Animal Foundation Board? Is that the correct word?
The Animal Control Board.
Animal Control Board is a place where he can vet all this, but our podium is not the place to spew his venom, and that's where I think it really is. I'd like to put a copy to the mayor. I suggested the mayor do the exact same thing as we're doing. It is important what he has to say. I am not trying to stop him to have freedom of speech by any stretch of the imagination, but we have dealt with this for over a year, and it needs to stop. And as you all know, I have lots of children, and I would be telling one of my 5-year-olds, I'm not listening to this story anymore. You know how we're going to handle this. And you can't cry wolf all the time. So I'd like to get that letter directed, get it to the mayor. Hopefully the mayor will have the same. And Mr. Wilmot and any other citizen is willing to come to our board meetings and talk about anything they want. We've had our 5 and 5 policy, 5 minutes at the beginning and then 5 minutes at the end to give other people the respect level, and then have a one-on-one meeting with the commissioners. And we've gone far more than probably anybody else has. And so let's do that with your blessing.
Absolutely.
Thank you, sir.
One more
Thanks,
thing
Bob.
real quick, Commissioners, and thank you, Bobby. Carl is a phenomenal employee for Allegany County, and I also want to recognize and perhaps even embarrass Richard DeVore, who has also, on a number of occasions in the last several years, carried the pager after hours and responded to calls.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, action agenda. Gentlemen, item number 1, as Mr. Yoder comes up, this is going to be the Jennings Run Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 2, Contract S-74. Good evening, Mr. Yoder. How are you, sir?
I'm good, Commissioners. How about yourself? On
Good.
January 15th, we had bid the Jennings Run Sewer Rehabilitation Project Phase 2. The low bidder was Excavating Associates, $1,356,619. We had 4 bids. Excavating Associates is a local contractor who's done work for us in the past. This project, we have a $1 million grant and loan combination from MDE. 87.5% of that, or $875,000, is loan forgiveness, essentially a grant that doesn't need to be paid back. The $125,000 does need to be paid back. USDA has also indicated a willingness to maybe fund any overrun we have over the million. Our intent right now is just to adjust the scope of it's a unit price contract, so we can adjust the scope of the work to stay within the funding that we have. This project is one of several in the Jennings Run area. There's work being done at Mount Savage, the Corrigansville Pump Station, this project, and all of those are funded through combinations of grants and loans. The loans get paid back by the users of the system. Right now, we're planning to have a public meeting on March the 12th at 7 o'clock here in this office to discuss with people from Jennings Run, talk about the project and also any impacts on rates. We're also going to meet with the Sanitary Commission in February to discuss the same thing, ways to discuss the project and also impacts on rates and how to pay back the loan. We anticipate that the average increase would be $65 to $70 a year. That's an average, depending on how it's decided to be paid back. So I guess if the newspaper would pick up the date of March the 12th, 7 o'clock for Jennings Run meeting. We have a similar issue at Old Town Road. We're going to have that meeting on March the 19th. Notes are being put on the next water and sewer bill that goes out. I guess I'm asking for the commissioner's approval of the contract. We would base the award on the bid amount. We would just adjust the scope as we went through, and then execution of any MDE or USDA if it becomes available, loan and grant documents.
Commissioners, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve the award of the Jennings Run Sanitary Sewer Rehabilitation Phase 2 Project Contract S-74. Is there a motion?
So moved.
And second.
It's been moved by Commissioner Valentine, seconded by Commissioner Brody. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mr. Yoder. Item number 2, Commissioners, is a utility agreement. This is with the Maryland Department of Information Technology. And I understand the so talented Mr. Patterson is here to explain.
Good evening.
Evening, sir.
What you have before you is a utility agreement between DeWitt and the county commissioners.
I think you got new glasses.
I do have new glasses.
You can see us now.
As you're aware, there's fiber being constructed throughout the county, and the contractor approached me about being able to fasten a utility across our bridge at Mexico Farms and run it out to our public safety building. In the agreement, it talks about permitting costs. It talks about future maintenance, et cetera, and all being Maryland Department of Information Technology being on the hook for those costs. And so they have already assigned it, and they have agreed to the agreement. And so tonight I'm just asking for your approval and request to sign and move forward.
Gentlemen, I'd like to entertain a motion to authorize the county commissioners to approve the utility agreement between the Maryland Department of Information Technology, between them
And us.
Well, I think,
Just make
and us.
Yeah, so moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Brody, seconded by Commissioner Valentine. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Maybe I should borrow those
Thank you,
glasses
Adam.
since they're new glasses as we go forward.
You obviously you have a few more kids.
Well, I was wondering, number 9 might come if I go get those type of glasses. They're kind of,
Oh my gosh.
All right, moving right along,
Please.
please. Mr. Everly, what do we have on our consent agenda this evening?
Once again, Commissioners, a light consent agenda for this week, and it relates to an appointment to the Revolving Loan Fund Committee for Tri-County Council.
Wonderful. Commissioners like to entertain a motion to accept our consent agenda.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
It has been moved by Commissioner Valentine, seconded by Commissioner Brody. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Mr. Everly.
Nothing further, sir.
Oh, my gosh.
It is always good to see County Attorney Bill Rudd. Like a rock, Bill Rudd is there. All right, commissioners, any statements on your part? Commissioner Valentine.
Well, Mike and I were in Annapolis Tuesday evening and most of the day Wednesday. There are a lot of activity down there, a lot of bills that could have, some bills would have positive effects for our county, some would have some negative effects. On Wednesday, we both testified on the mine coal tax issue. They're trying to repeal that tax subsidies that actually ends up helping the local coal miners prevent some environmental issues. People don't seem to realize that this coal runoff was there before the mines. That's the way they found half the places to mine the coal. They saw the dirty water running out of the ground. They knew coal was there. So actually, by mining the coal, we are cleaning our environment, keeps a lot of people employed in the area, helps the profitability of AES Warrior Run power plant. So the gentleman that proposed repealing that bill really didn't understand the issues. When people make comment that we've got coal miners here making profits of somewhere between $500 to $800 million a year, I think not easy to figure he doesn't understand the issue real well. But there's a lot of issues down there. We'll be going down every Wednesday for MACO meetings, and most of those times, if there's bills of interest, we'll go ahead and be testifying on bills while we're down there.
Okay. Commissioner Brody.
Yes, sir. As always, I usually do the calendar, but again, I'm going to ask if we can forgo that this week because it's, as always, on the web. I am going to discuss just briefly on a letter that was sent this week on behalf of us that I actually signed against the Firearms Safety Act of 2013. After reviewing, and I'm sure you agree because everyone read this, it really regulates a regulation. And I fail to see where putting more regulations in place is going to help gun violence. In both tragedies in Colorado and in Connecticut, it was a true crime, but the gun was just a tool. It didn't purposely look out anybody. And to put, Maryland's got several laws in place if they would just apply the laws that's used. So that sums the letter up, and if the media needs a copy of the letter, we'll provide, or if any citizen wants a copy of the letter, we will provide. But that was my thoughts on that, and I thought that since the letter was mailed, people ought to know.
Okay, perfect. Okay, commissioners, as you may have read in the Cumberland Times News, I have I've directed Bill Rudd to send a letter to Gary Hanna, or talk about dialogue about the position of ex officio on the Board of Education. I've not brought it to your all's approval or disapproval yet. What I have asked is to get a consensus to have a bill then draft. When that bill does get drafted, we will bring it to this body for your approval for that. I have a letter that had gone to Delegate Beitzel about it. When that bill does come up, you'll have the ability to vote on it, yay or nay. Then also that bill will also go to the Board of Education as well. But this letter reads, the Honorable Wendell Beitzel, Delegate, in reference to ex officio member on the Allegany County Board of Education. Dear Delegate Beitzel, the County Commissioners have been in discussion with the Board of Education about the prospect of eliminating President of the Board of County Commissioners and it's an ex officio member of the Allegany County Board of Education. Our research reveals that only 3 counties, Carroll, Garrett, and Allegany, have county commissioners members as ex officio members of the Board of Education. As an ex officio member of the Board of Education, the President of the County Commissioners does not have a vote, and as a practical matter, has no input in the actions of the Board of Education. In addition, to be an effective ex officio member, the Commissioner is required to spend a considerable amount of time away from his other Commissioner duties. The makeup of the Allegheny County Board of Education is found in Education Article 3-201. The only change would be proposing the elimination of subsection B2, which states composition. The Allegheny County Board consists of two, the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners and any county commissioner so designed by the chairman, who is the ex officio non-voting member. The balance of the subsection calling for the 5 elected members and a non-voting student member would remain unchanged. You will find an attached copy of the letter from Gary Hanna, attorney of the Allegheny County Board of Education, indicating a consensus of the Board of Education. We ask that you would draft this bill to be provided to our counsel, Bill Rudd, as well as Gary Hanna, counsel for the Board of Education. Thank you for your attention in this matter. Signed by Michael McKay, president of the board. I'm president of the Board of Commissioners. So, gentlemen, when we get that draft, it'll come. Then you'll have an ability, as I said, to vote on it, yea or nay. The Board of Education will also have that ability as well, and we'll go from there. But for lack of better words, since this is an animal night, the cat was let out of the bag a little bit earlier. I would have come to you if I had the bill in hand. So if I stepped on either one of your toes, I apologize.
Your size, that's not nice.
Gee.
It's not the size, it's the weight behind it. Okay, anyhow. You know, it's job security for you.
It is.
Okay, constituents. We have Mr. Taylor, Ed Taylor, who signed up tonight. As Mr. Taylor does come to the podium, remind everybody that we have a 5 and 5. 5 minutes is extended to speak about your topic of du jour, as they would say.
Commissioners, good evening. For the record, my name is Edward W. Taylor, Jr., 400 South Allegheny Street, Cumberland, Maryland. And I'm here tonight representing the Cumberland Historic Cemetery Organization, which I have been president for a very long period of time. This is one of only 2 historically incorporated organizations left in Allegheny County that is privately funded. Since 1983, we have erected and restored over $4.5 million worth of monuments and cemeteries, mainly in the Cumberland, Maryland area, but as far away as Micanopy, Florida. We own 11 cemeteries. All are in Allegheny County, with the exception of 3 in nearby West Virginia, and we maintain those sites and hold perpetual care funds for them. It's a very expensive, laborious project, but it's an act of mercy, which we consider our great patriotic duty. One of the, this is our 30th year, by the way, and that is the purpose for the booklet. We have 50,000 copies of those, and they're being passed out door to door to every home, apartment, and business in Allegheny County and nearby West Virginia. You may have already gotten one at your door. If not, we'll soon be there. One thing I want to comment on, one of the issues that we have really worked at over the past 10 years is the issue we have with education right here in Allegheny County, Maryland. The lack of proper United States history being taught in Allegheny County public schools. Our county tax dollars are paying for this, state tax dollars, federal tax dollars. All of us are paying for this. Recently, for example, at Westside School, there seems to be this great push to learn Chinese culture. The Chinese are under communist rule, if we don't realize that. This is February. This is Washington's birthday, February 22nd. I would wager a $100 bill, if you were to go through that school, I guarantee you 10 students couldn't tell you that. I am just amazed at what they do not know. The younger grades at Westside School, they're teaching them Chinese. I question whether these, these children can read and write English before we're getting into Chinese. It's called the Chinese Immersion Program. We need to learn American values. I want to thank our commissioners for really representing us, especially here in the 6th District, where we're really not represented. But on the county level, we are. Thank you, Commissioner McKay, for using our Lord Jesus Christ in your prayers. That's very necessary. We are a Christian nation, and I'm sure there's been people come through here and say we're not. We are. our Bill of Rights, our Declaration of Independence, our Constitution are all based on Christian precepts. No other religion, Christianity. Like it or not, our founding fathers were Christians, and they used their values and their Christian ethics to forge our laws in the beginnings of our nation. And we're losing that. We have a superintendent being paid well over $150,000 here in Cumberland, Maryland, with county money and state money. Dr. David Cox, who was on a crusade 2 years ago against our corporate seal. If you take a look at our county seal, I see a cross on that. I guess Dr. Cox hasn't taken a look at that lately, or he'll be in here after you on that issue. And simply on our seal, it's just a monument with a cross on top of it. You drive past any cemetery, you're going to see crosses, given fact. But this is the type of mentality we have. I've confronted the Board of Ed about it. They will not comment. They will not say a word. They're incredibly rude. They work for me. I don't work for them. I pay them. They don't pay me. And when I ask a question, I expect an answer, and I don't get any. All they do is sit and stare at you. I want to thank Commissioner Brody for not wanting to give as much money for the new school. This Board of Ed we have, all of them are Barack Hussein Obama supporters. They are all Obama supporters. And that tells you how they think. They do not have our ethics and our values of Allegany County. And I would really like you to stop and think before you give them another dime for any type of project. And I really wish you would check into exploring about really how much true American history is being taught in these schools, because very little is. And just do a little survey of the students. That can tell you. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ed. Appreciate that. Thank you for your comments. Okay. Commissioners, I'd like to remind you that our next public business meeting will be February 14th, 2013, 5 o'clock, right here in room 100. And to remind you that our next public work session will be February 14th, 2013, 3 o'clock in room 212. I understand it's Valentine's Day and there might be some Valentine's cookies.
Or chocolate.
Well, the cookies.
Somebody wearing a diaper and carrying a
Well,
bag.
by February the 14th, I hope to make an announcement that my bride has given birth. So, but the due date's the 16th, so I may be here, I may not be here. It all depends.
Congratulations.
It all depends on the Lord. So, he actually knows when the birthday is. So, all right. As we like to close every meeting, we thank you very much for participating in your government, and we hope you have a nice evening.